Thank you for joining us to this, which is the third of our 4 events we are running this month. I'm Luke Marlowe, and I'm the Communications Manager for the Young Humanists. I don't have much of a relation with apostasy. As a child, my plan was to become a vicar in the Church of England, but I became an atheist at the age of 16 when I realised that a big old homosexual like me probably wasn't the best fit, and that God probably wasn't real. I still have a large collection of cardigans and Birkenstocks though, so maybe my ambition was just to dress like a vicar as opposed to actually be one. We're running these events with Young Humanists, European Young Humanists and Young Humanists International, and we've got one more next Wednesday focusing on campaigning. In terms of how things are going to be structured tonight, so we will kick off with introductions from our panellists, and then we'll ask them to explain their relationship with apostasy and renouncing religion. After that, there'll be a general question for them all, and then we'll open up to an audience Q&A where you can get involved in the discussion and ask questions of the panel. Please use the chat to ask any questions and let us know whether it's directed at the panel generally or to a specific member. You can ask questions throughout the event and we'll do our best to pick those up when we get to the Q&A. The event formally ends at 7:30, but if you do want to stick around after the event and chat to other attendees, we'll keep the Zoom call open for sort of 10-15 minutes, so you can have a general chat with other attendees. Normal Zoom rules apply, so for our audience members, please stay on mute and with your video off until we come to the open discussion, and we'll let you know when that is. And if you have any issues or concerns, please drop either myself or Julian Webb, who is on the call as well, a private message, and he'll be on hand to help. So on to today's event, which focuses on renouncing religion. Belief in a religion is a fundamental human right, and with that comes the right to not believe. Unfortunately, this right is not afforded to everyone. For some people, leaving their faith can be a complicated, challenging, and even dangerous process. Apostates can bring shame and dishonor to a family, and as a result, they often experience emotional and physical abuse. Now, the right to change and renounce a religion may seem like a standard thing to those of us who has grown up in the UK or in Central Europe, but it's illegal in around 20 countries and punishable by death in at least 10. As humanists, it's our aim and our duty to support those wishing to leave religion, and our speakers are going to give us some background on themselves, their situations, and discuss how we can help those wishing to renounce religion. I'll introduce our speakers first and then ask them to give us some background on their relationship with apostasy. And first we have Izzy Posen. Izzy grew up in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in London. He is now a student of physics and philosophy at the University of Bristol and researches and writes about the insular community of his upbringing. Welcome, Izzy. If you could tell us some more about yourself, your background and your relationship with apostasy, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Luke. I have 5 minutes, correct?
You do indeed.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Izzy. I grew up in London. I am 25 years old. Now, I grew up in a very insular community, which is a very religious community, but for the purposes of understanding better what I went through and what people, what apostates from this community go through, think of it as a cult. Now, I'm just going to give a quick caveat. This is not sociologically defined as a cult, but as you'll see and I'll explain more the kind of community I grew up in, you'll see that that is the best way to understand what apostates from this community go through. So let me give you a couple of details of the community I grew up in. So the community is known as the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. It's a Jewish community which follows the Jewish religion, but it has taken it to an extreme. It sees the modern world, the modern Western world, as a threat, and regards it as evil and corrupt. And it sees the only solution for good people, and good people in this context mean observant Jews, to completely isolate themselves from the secular world and shun secular culture completely. So how do they do this? They completely cut. So you're not allowed to have any interaction. As a child growing up and as a teenager growing up in this community, you're not allowed to have any interaction with somebody outside the community. You even speak your own language. Growing up, even though I grew up in London, I didn't speak English. I couldn't speak English. We spoke Yiddish, which is a 1,000-year-old Jewish language which evolved from German. For those interested in the historical details, we weren't allowed to watch TV, to read secular newspapers, to listen to the radio, to even browse the internet. The internet is strictly forbidden. We went to our own community schools, which are not only Jewish schools, but ultra-Orthodox Jewish schools, which means they're segregated even from other Jews. Because just for those who don't know much about the Jewish community in Britain, it's a very diverse community. There are many Jews who are well integrated in secular society. In fact, in fact, you might hear from other speakers who define themselves. You might hear from other speakers tonight who define themselves maybe as ex-Muslim. I'm not ex-Jewish. I'm still Jewish because the Jewish community in the UK is very diverse, and it's more of an ethnicity for many rather than a religion. But we grew up entirely isolated, even from other Jews, isolated from the world, isolated from other Jews, only allowed to mingle with other ultra-Orthodox Jews. Now, the worst thing you can do as somebody growing up in this community is question the religion, question the rabbis, question the teachings you were told. So we grew up with really outlandish views, such that okay, the world is 6,000 years old, creationist views, but even beyond that. For example, we awaited the Messiah, who is going to come every day, make us, our community, rule the world, and all of you are going to be our slaves. We believe that, and we prayed every day, 3 times a day, for this to happen. I think I'll move on now because I don't want to go over my 5 minutes. But in my teens, I did start questioning the teachings of the community, and this was a very torturous and arduous process, filled with tremendous guilt and tremendous trauma and terror. I was terrified of hell. Even just questioning in my own head was scary, terrifying. Eventually, after many years of battling with this and managing to get hold of other literature and of teaching myself English and allowing myself to question, I eventually did come out as irreligious, and I immediately got kicked out of the community, got kicked out of home. I was even homeless for a time because I was kicked out without anything. I lost contact with my family, which, as you can imagine, in very conservative communities, the families are extremely extended. I'm the oldest of 10 children. I have hundreds of cousins, dozens of aunts and uncles, and I was cut off from most of them. And to this day, 5 years later, I am not in touch with 8 of my 9 siblings. My journey away from the extreme community has been very difficult, and I'm frankly still struggling with issues. But I have managed to largely make it in the secular world, to get myself educated. As you can imagine, when I left, I had to start from the beginning. I didn't have GCSEs or anything, so I did manage to catch up on these things, and now I'm in my 4th year of a university degree. So, the difficult journey it's been difficult, but in a large measure, it's been successful. I think I'm coming to the end of my 5 minutes, but I'll quickly say a word about how we can help apostates, and maybe I can talk more during question times with other panelists. So I'm out there on the internet. I've given interviews to the BBC and to others, and the reason I do that is because for many people in the community, they don't know anyone who has left, and they are always told that people who leave just don't make it. That we were always told that society is going to reject us, society is going to be anti-Semitic against us, and I think for our voices to be out there, to be a role model, to show people it can be done, you can leave, is very, very important. And I get, and the first step for many people in my former community of leaving is getting hold of the internet and looking what's out there. So, I think it's important. A voice like mine is out there on the internet. People can access it, and I get calls all the time from people who are in very difficult situations, very distressed situations, and I try to refer them to the help they need. And I'll talk more about it later, but I think I'll leave it here for now.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Izzy. And we've already got some questions coming in for you, so we will get to those shortly. So on to our next speaker, and that is Saff Khalique. So Saff is a British Pakistani ex-Muslim student and activist. It says in my bio, currently studying a Master's in International Journalism, but I believe she's just carrying out a research project into the relationship between the freedom of religion and the freedom of the press in Islamic countries. Saff left Islam in May 2018, but it was not until September 2019 that she went public with her disbelief. Through this time, she has established a blog, The Amber Journals, where she discusses religion, politics, and women's rights issues, has participated in panel discussions with Faith to Faithless and Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain, and was a member of Index on Censorship's Youth Board from January to June 2020. So welcome, Saff. We would love to hear more about your background and your experiences as an ex-Muslim.
Hey, so my story in terms of the ex-Muslim movement is normally talked about as the nicer story, in the sense that luckily I didn't go through any sort of physical abuse, which a lot of apostates do have, and I still have quite a strong relationship with my immediate family. So I left a religion in 2018, and I was outed to my parents. So I didn't even know at that point that I was ex-Muslim. I just knew I wasn't practicing, and it was in a conversation we had. I blurted out of nowhere, "I'm not religious. I don't believe in God," and then that was what had me sort of processing and questioning religion a lot more, and whether I could be Muslim. Mm-hmm. So this was sort of during my second year of uni. I went back because I had exams. And through that time, I searched the internet and came across the ex-Muslim subreddit. And that was where I was like, okay, so there's people who have similar beliefs to me, people going through similar processes. Then I came across Imtiaz Shams's YouTube video, and he's the co-founder of Faith to Faithless. And it was through sort of YouTube that I realized, okay, there are people like me. I don't have to sort of follow what is known to me, what I grew up with. In terms of sort of the Islam I was exposed to, it was very liberal. My parents are second generation Pakistanis, so they were both born and raised here. For context, in terms of how religion was practiced in our home, my parents didn't pray 5 times a day. We practiced Ramadan, as that was the one time of year everyone got a bit more religious. Me and my sister were never forced to wear the hijab or anything like that, so it was a pretty relaxed household. My exposure to religion was pretty great in terms of my sort of Islamic schooling, where we went to a madrasa, which is where we learned how to read the Quran, stories about the Prophet and everything after school. There was, again, sometimes there can be sort of issues of teachers being violent. There was none of that in mine. We used to have Eid parties and stuff like that, so it was overall a good experience. But sort of my fundamental reason for leaving Islam was because I didn't believe in God, and then trying to sort of convince myself back into the religion by reading more into it in terms of sort of doctrine, the treatment of women, treatment of LGBT individuals. I was like, I can't uphold these beliefs, and it was not enough to convince me that the Islamic God was one worth believing in. And then after that, I kind of just kept quiet, tried to repair sort of my family relationships, and it's worked sort of in the benefit for me that my parents now sort of see me as an individual, as an adult, especially for sort of South Asian women specifically. There's sort of a fear of letting women sort of be quite independent. I was the first girl to go to university that had actually moved out and didn't stay at home. I've been the first to sort of live independently on my own outside of my parents' house at such a young age that didn't involve marriage. So it was by coming out as irreligious and sort of standing up for myself there, I've been allowed to do all of these things. And it sort of made things easier for my sister, who is quite a spiritual person, not sort of traditionally Islamic religious, but she is into sort of laws of attraction and stuff like that. But now what I do is I talk about sort of apostasy and blasphemy online a lot, especially on my blog where I write about it, because when I left Islam, I didn't know that you could be killed for leaving Islam. These were the things that you weren't taught about at mosque. These were the things your parents didn't tell you, or that my parents weren't really aware of, because that's not what they taught. But after sort of seeing and interacting with sort of ex-Muslims living in countries like Pakistan, living under sort of this blasphemous rule, I have felt like I was in a pretty privileged position. I should be talking about these issues. Now, I researched into sort of the freedom of religion and the freedom of the press in Iran and Saudi Arabia, because I wanted to sort of find a way to research ex-Muslim issues, but in the field of journalism, which I was really interested in, because you don't really hear that much about apostasy and blasphemy cases on sort of mainstream news. You have to sort of search for the articles or search for that specific case. And it was Rahaf Mohammed's case that was in the news that really sort of struck out to me. Yeah, I think I'm coming up to time now. Oh, you did.
I was on mute. Yeah. That's perfect. Thanks, Saff. Thanks ever so much. That's pretty much bang on time. And our final speaker this evening is Hari Parekh. So Hari was formerly the president of Humanist Students and is currently the chair of European Young Humanists. He is going to do the rest of his introduction himself, because he has too many qualifications for me to get out without garbling them, to be completely honest. So over to you, Hari.
Brilliant. So thank you, Luke. My name is Hari Parekh. I'm currently a trainee clinical psychologist at the University of Liverpool. I've been working within the student sector of working within kind of humanism and non-religion for near to 5 to 6 years now. And I think through that journey, I've held a number of positions as well as running the student sector. Currently, I've also worked for Faith to Faithless, and I'm currently working for Young Humanists International for their European sector. Now, I think the interesting thing about apostasy is that I was initially Hindu. I left my religious faith back in 2013 when I was at university. Realized that there was no real support there for people who were in that position at university, so set up my society. And actually from that, it's basically just kind of it's snowballed, and it's just gotten greater as I've gone into it. Following that, what I found was that when I started working with people like Imtiaz Shams and Alia Salim, and Faith to Faithless was in its kind of original state at the start, I then realized that actually people are being abused as a result of leaving their religious faith. Now, I left mine in 2013, and I told my mum and dad over Skype, and I haven't suffered any of the serious issues that I get told on quite a regular basis. So I thought that was interesting. So when I finished my undergrad and started my master's, that was kind of like a focal point for me. So we looked into the worldwide abuse of apostates within religious households, and whether they are a hidden population of abuse victims too. So that was really where things started to kind of pick up, and we did. So, and we published that research. It was published in January 2020. And it's the first piece of research where we can argue or highlight or point to, let's say, scientific literature which shows that there are people being abused behind closed doors as a result of leaving their religious faith. We had 228 people from 30 different countries worldwide. We showed a trend that non-religiosity is occurring. So we had like a 1,032% increase in people identifying as non-religious now, compared to the 91 to 93% decrease in people affiliating with a religious faith, in particular Christianity and Islam. We had a higher sample of people from a Christian household initially than we did Muslim. despite that, the stats significantly showed that people from a Muslim heritage background were more likely to face things like assault, serious assault, or psychological abuse compared to the others. And I think that's quite astounding, really. In addition to that, what we also found is that victims weren't reporting their abuse to the police. So the reasons for that were that they believed that it'd be disrespectful, so it'd be harboring or it'd be going against the level of izzat or honor of the family, and it'd be a betrayal of the family as well. A few people said that they thought that the police would be unable to help them, and a lot of them also argued that there'd be repercussions if they were found out for having reported that level of abuse. So in relation to kind of literature and what's occurring in the academic sphere, this is the first opportunity that the academic sphere has to show that this is an actual phenomenon worldwide. Now, moving on from that, the reason for today's talk or going forwards from that is to really look at, actually, these are people's lives. These are people that are going through really difficult experiences, from, as Izzy said earlier, from things like homelessness to shunning to being kicked out. And actually, what we then find psychologically is that you've then got an individual that's having to manage so many different identity kind of formations in one go. Interestingly, and part of this is that the way that the non-religious are perceived at the moment, perhaps, is also an issue. So I think my story, even Saff's story, kind of sounds like an anomaly to a point where things are kind of, they're not as difficult as quite a lot of people's life stories are. And that's a problem, in that people are still worried about the consequences of leaving. People are still worried about the consequences of going through this transition. Whether they even go through the transition or not, whether they even take the risk of doing this, is a big thing. And actually, there's a lot of financial security or even just emotional security at risk in going through this journey. And it's very much a line where it's, once you've made it, you've kind of drawn it in the sand. So it's a very permanent line as well. So a lot of people that go through this are usually informed that, this is a very, it's very easy to kind of not believe in a religious faith anymore. It's very easy to not be religious or believe in a God, etc. Well, actually, it's a lot more complicated than sometimes it's given credit. I would argue that it's probably one of the most difficult decisions you have to make, because you don't know what the consequences are going to be as a result of that. So, and you then have to face those consequences as a result of that too. So I think for something that is really, for an act or a consequence where you don't know what the intended outcome will be, that increases the stakes and increases the level of risk that this transition actually provides. And the other thing is that it doesn't end just like that. So, having to go from one identity formation to another, you're looking at actually questioning your entire sense of who you are, your entire sense of what it means to be you in that moment, and all the kind of thoughts and behaviors and feelings that you have towards things. You're having to rewire all of those things all over again just by going through that journey a lot of the time. And then what we find is it's also a loss. So the attachment that you have to a God, the attachment that you have to religious faith, the attachment that you have to culture, tradition, family, all of those things as well, you're really kind of reconstructing all of those things at the same time. And that's an issue, because imagine how many people are actually going through that alone, especially with the mental health issues that are there at the moment in society today, and are not able to receive support because nobody knows that it exists, or nobody knows that it's a thing, or nobody knows actually what to do as if people are going through those transitions and experiences as well. So when we then look at the apostasy journey, we're then looking at how the outcome then is. I usually use Simba from The Lion King as my way of explaining it. But he was kicked out by Scar for supposedly killing Mufasa. Spoiler alert. And was banished or was shunned from that family, from that community. The hyenas were then sent after him to kill him, which is no different from everybody turning their back on you. You then got that whole period of Simba walking through the desert, like his lament, until he finds Timon and Pumbaa. So until you find something that is able to kind of get you out of that rough part, then you might get lucky. What happens during that lament period? I mean, that could be that could go from one side to being really, really, really serious to not as well. So again, the changes in identity, I know, right? The changes in identity and the changes and the way that somebody would have to go through those processes, and the responsibility that's added to the individual because it's their decision to make. It's a really tricky thing to then expect somebody to just do without any support. So that's my, I mean, just to conclude, I think, because I think the more time we have for things like questions and stuff, the better. I've got a piece of research out there, which is the first one showing the worldwide abuse of apostates, which is great because we can show the scientific community, we can show the psychological one, we can show, the academic sphere that it exists as a thing. But we can also show people that argue that where's your evidence that this is a thing? There it is. I think that there's more to do because there's just this one at the moment, but it's the very start of a journey to actually providing a voice for people that are going through this. Just to conclude, in my eyes, in the UK, it would come directly under things like the honor-based violence definition, and actually, or the so-called honor-based violence, if you can call it that, because of the levels of control, the level of protection to perceived cultural and kind of religious beliefs, values, and social norms, and the kind of perpetrators of that being family, and the whole thing being wrapped around guilt, shame, and the issues of managing somebody's honor code. Again, a lot of guilt and shame to provide one person, a lot of things to put onto one person, and how dare we have a system that allures that it's the individual's responsibility to then, to manage that, and good luck with it. There's so many power dynamics involved in that one thing. The problem at the moment is none of these professionals that might come into contact with people would even know. So again, right at the start of that. Is that all right?
Thanks, Hari.
That's quite a long-winded ramble, but that's
no. That's fantastic. And if anyone was spoiled by those Lion King spoilers, there, it came out 26.
I apologise.
It came out 26 years ago, Hari. I think the time for spoilers has passed. Great. So I sort of wanted to ask a general question to everyone on the panel, which I think you've all touched upon, and also I think ties into T's question in the chat that has just been asked. So I guess as most of us are humanists or kind of people who agree with what humanists stand for, what should we do as a community, and what can we be doing in order to support those renouncing religion and facing persecution for it? And T has then also asked, it's kind of mentioned that Saff and Hari have both undertaken graduate level research into this field. So on top of that, really, are there any areas of research that could be needed to help further break ground to kind of support apostates? Izzy, I think you were quite interested in answering that one, so you can kick off, I think.
Yeah, sure. I would reframe the question. So you need work on several fronts. So the research that Hari is doing and Saff are doing are really important and great. There's also something else you need in addition to research, which ties in quite well with research, and research helps drive it. And that's creating the paradigms. And I'll explain what I mean. We have, for example, a paradigm called homophobia or transphobia. It's a word it explains a prejudice that a certain group face. It explains the challenges and what some call oppressions, what certain groups face. Right now, we don't have a word akin to that for what apostates face. We don't have a word, let's say apostophobia, for a pattern of behavior that people who leave religions can face from their religious relatives, from the former community, from other people. And as a result of that, because we don't have that paradigm, there isn't the support. If you go to university, every student union has support for LGBT students, and there's posters. If you've been affected by homophobia, come talk to us. There's support, right? There is nothing equivalent for, let's call it, apostophobia. There is nothing equivalent, and for that, the students union don't have any means of support to help students, and we know lots of people come to university. University is a place where they move away a bit from the maybe isolated communities. They meet people from different backgrounds. Students do lose their faith in university, and often, I have several friends in uni who are in the closet, not being gay because it's no longer the 80s, and it's very, it's not, if you're gay, there's lots of support to come out, but in the closet religious wise, and there is nothing. Students' Union have nothing to support students. Not only that, it's even when you tell people it's the problem. I have a ex-Muslim friend who was in the closet. People say, it's not a big deal, you're just Islamophobic. We need the paradigm alongside the research. We need a word. We need to acknowledge this is, apostates on a press group. Let's use the lingo that's currently in fashion, and let's have the paradigms to be able to help people.
I think, just adding to that, I think it's an interesting thought, and I don't think you're wrong at all. Interestingly, when I was at University of Northampton, when I started my society, I mean, the number of people from the Islamic societies would come up to me going, who allowed a non-religious, society to be here? And it's just like, well, the Students' Union did. Actually, you got, students voted it in. And it's like, well, who's running it? Me. How dare you? It's like, what do you mean? Like, you're a brown guy. I was like, yes. You're a traitor to your heritage to run a society like this. There's another one where I was at a freshers fair. Now our society was quite poor, and I bought all of the freshers materials. And actually, some Black Christian students came up to it, picked them up, and they were basically saying, "What kind of foolishness of a university allows this to even be a thing at university?" And they threw it across the room. So I think the issue with the issue at university really strongly, and I think Izzy's point backs this up, is that what we found in my student activism days, let's say, which are now quite a bit of time ago, is that people are more likely to be faced with questions and the opportunity to think about their deepest held beliefs at university. That's partially or predominantly, apart from going out, predominantly that's what university is there for. So I think the opportunity to be challenged is there. And now what we then find is that this is where we then have the opportunity to inflict doubt into people's perceptions of how things are from the things they brought over from home. So what we know in the literature is that first generation of people that have come over from somewhere to here will hold really strongly this cultural identity that they've come along with, or the religious identity that they come along with, and they'll hold it really staunchly. Now, what we then also find is that at university, you've got those students of those kind of families coming to university with the same ideals and the same kind of thoughts and practices as well. So if you put that together, you've then got an opportunity at university where you can easily challenge that by questioning and answering. Now, the problem is, and the issue is, and it's something that I've tried to tackle for a number of years and basically failed at, is that there's not a very coherent understanding at all as to what occurs at university in relation to faith and belief and people leaving it. So faith and belief and leaving religion is still seen to this day, I would argue, as a taboo, in that it's not really seen. And if it is occurring, then people are also likely to send them to their kind of religious kind of chaplaincy to hopefully bring them back in, or to get them back in cohorts where they were, or to send them to the relevant kind of society that would then kind of put them back in touch with their people and kind of bring them back in. Now, is that a concern? Pretty much. The stability, the strength, the support, all of the things that religious faith, or all the things that those communities can provide on the face of it, are really, really supportive and are really psychologically good. That there's no denying that at all in relation to the way that religious communities can provide and support. The problem is that if somebody's actively questioning that and doubting that, and you're then trying to usher them back through, then that's an issue, because you're then not supporting them at where they are in that moment. You're basically telling them that their opinion doesn't matter. Go back. You're being an idiot. So what do we do, and how do we do it? I think this is where, funding is an issue with this anyway, but actually this is where we look at the Equality Act, and this is where we utilize the legislation that's already out there in going, this is a thing, and universities need to do more. So whether that's a charter, whether that's whether that's a signed document by universities or by the NUS or by students' unions actually supporting it, even that would be the first step to actually supporting students to realise that they have that opportunity or that freedom to change their mind or have a different perspective.
Sorry to cut you off there, Hari. You are unstoppable when you get going, which is great. So two questions which I think tie in to those points both from Lucy actually. So the first one for Hari and Saff. Had you not been to university, do you think there's a chance you would still be in your former religion? And how much longer do you think you would have stayed before reaching the same conclusion you're at now, if you think it was inevitable? Saff, I think.
So yeah. I've had this conversation many a times with sort of my ex-Muslim friends, and had I not moved out for university, so if I'd stayed at home, because I did apply for a home university, I would have been living at home. I still would have been in that environment. I would have been still in my religion at the age of like 22 now. I probably wouldn't have gone on to do a master's. I probably would have just got a job, and within like the next few years, I would then probably be married and lived a life in sort of the same sort of sphere my parents did and my cousins now do. Going away to university, that exposed me to sort of, on the first hand, I didn't know you could be Pakistani and Christian. Like, I didn't know they existed. I thought, you're Pakistani, you're Muslim. And that's how I met one of my sort of closest friends at uni. And it was sort of there that I then did leave faith, and like they said in the sort of question before, so when I came out to my parents, I had to then go back for exams, and we were in the stage where I couldn't quite come home for definite. So it was a couple of months, and I went to my university services. They sort of treated it as estrangement. They didn't actually know about apostasy or any of sort of these issues. So I was kind of left to almost handle it on my own and with my friends, because no one sort of knew how to deal with it. In terms of like that, the importance is university, and especially for a girl like me to actually get out and actually experience these sort of things was necessary for me to even be able to sort of think about leaving faith. And without university, I wouldn't even have known about ex-Muslim issues. I wouldn't be who I am today.
Fantastic. Thanks. That's fascinating. So I think on those points, there is another question from Lucy that also ties into a question from Sarah. So Lucy has said, how do we do all we can to support those trying to leave religion without being seen to be targeting religious communities, given the tendency to tiptoe around issues relating to religion for fear of being called racist? And then tied into that, Sarah has asked if promoting secular societies in a more positive way is a potential key factor. She often feels that secularism, humanism, and atheism has a publicity issue, which I agree with. So whoever would like to speak on that one.
I would like to take this one, because it's one, if you talk about leaving Islam, you're automatically labelled an Islamophobe. That's the biggest thing we sort of face. But sort of the way I sort of talk about it is, being ex-Muslim and ex-Muslim across the world, it affects Muslims too, because if you want to change from the dominant interpretation of Islam to a more sort of freer version, or you want to practice it how you want to, not how the government tells you, you are also labelled an apostate. The way we sort of can practice religion here in the UK, the way you can interpret Islam, you can't do that in countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia, where there is no freedom. So in terms of sort of appealing to sort of the Muslim demographic, or people who sort of pose those questions, I sort of give that sort of response. But it is very, very common. I think in terms of sort of secular societies, there are also secular sort of religious individuals. So they're sort of giving voice to those living in countries like Pakistan and Iran. There are secularists there who may not still hold their religion sort of close to them, but want to practice it how they do, but they still want secularism. A lot of people don't. A lot of younger Muslims that I've now sort of interacted with, they don't agree with sort of the law and religion being interpreted as one that needs to be separate, because again, everybody has such different interpretations of religion. But it's one thing that ex-Muslims do probably face more than, say, sort of ex-Christians, is sort of the Islamophobia label is thrown at you in the straight away. But when you sort of have to then state, no, there are 12 countries that will kill you for leaving the religion. There is widespread shunning in countries like the UK and the US where, you know, you can practice religion freely. It needs to be talked about.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. That's a great answer. So Izzy, we've got 3 for you, which we can rattle through in quick succession. So the first one is from Fezula, and I think is kind of related to the fact that over the last year or so, there's been a bit more publicity on kind of Orthodox Jewish communities through series and books like Unorthodox and One of Us. Are they accurate? Secondly, what planted the seeds of doubt when you were in such an isolated community? That's from Toby. And third, how does the segregation of the kind of the community you grew up in from everyone else play into the process of actually trying to extricate yourself from the religion?
Okay, because I have a very short memory, I'll start answering the first question, and then I'll kindly ask you if you can remind me of the next one.
That's
all right.
Fine, yeah.
Okay, very briefly on the unorthodox. I've written an article about it. If you Google my name plus unorthodox, you can read it. So I won't go into length. One of Us is a documentary, very accurate. It's a documentary. Unorthodox is a fictionalized Hollywood production. Okay, keep in mind it's a fictional story based on true facts. But it is fiction, and the community is portrayed, for a certain purpose. It's portrayed to get you to feel the oppressiveness of somebody who isn't comfortable there. But keep in mind that you're seeing the community from the perspective of somebody who isn't comfortable there, right? So I've had people, sadly, who watch Unorthodox and think, oh, everyone in the ultra-Orthodox community is always depressed and always miserable. That's not true. They're very happy people there, like there is in every community. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, if you want to know more in detail, I'm happy to talk more after the event or read my article, but I don't want to go into length here. Right, second question.
Thanks, Izzy. I've put a link to the article in the chat so everyone can read that. Yes, second one, we're going to have to do some scrolling. Hang on. The second one was basically...
what planted seeds of doubt?
What planted seeds of doubt when you were in such an isolated community, yeah.
Yeah, it was a process of many, many years. It started from the beginning of my teens until I was 20. So it was a process of 7 years, very gradual, I can't point to a specific moment, but it's just getting familiar more with the Jewish sources. And you know the phrase knowledge is power, knowing, when somebody tells you have to believe something and you don't know the details, you can't question it because you don't know what you're questioning. Right, but as a Jewish male, I would be expected. I was expected to be a rabbi. I went through training to be a rabbi, so I learned all the sources. The more I learned, the more I had the power to examine the sources for myself, and the more it didn't make sense to me. So throughout my teens, as I was learning more and more, I was learning medieval rabbis and things. Just seemed very medieval. They said things that didn't make sense to me, and I saw lots of contradictions between the Bible and the Talmud, and this prompted me to start reading a bit more on the fringes. So it's a very slow process of, obviously you don't go from being an ultra-Orthodox Jew to reading Dawkins. That took years. But first you read, fringe voices who are slightly in the canon, but a bit on the edge. I mean, anyone from any religion, you'll know there's the Orthodox voices, and then there's always a voice who is still in the canon, still acceptable, but says things that rabbis will tell you needs to be carefully interpreted. So you read these and you read wider and wider, more on the fringe, until you realize one day that you actually don't believe the whole thing. Yeah.
And then the last one was, did the fact that you were in an ultra-Orthodox community make it particularly difficult, and how did you go about kind of extricating yourself from that?
Yeah, so I believe there was also something about segregation in there. Yeah, so the segregation is an essential mechanism that keeps people in. you are so segregated, you even speak a different language, so you can't even think of wanting to talk to an outsider, ask them what they believe, and this narrative of us good, them bad, and don't ever talk to them is really effective, because you're taught that the rest of the world is bad. You never get to talk to them to find out that they're not bad. So it's very effective. And so how did I break it? Yeah, it was again very, very gradual process. Meeting one non-Jew per chance and speaking with them, semi-secretly, and finding out that they're not a bad person, and then going back and my rabbi's telling me, oh no, they're a bad person. They just pretend to be nice because all non-Jews are bad. They're just like putting on a facade. And then, but it breaks down. You speak with another non-Jew and you meet another. I'm a curious person who explores. So I'd find opportunities to try and peer into what is it like to be a non-Jew and to live as a non-Jew. And I just didn't buy it that they're all evil, and so the barriers broke down very, very gradually. But yes, the segregation is a very effective mechanism.
Great, thank you ever so much. So one for you, Hari, from fellow doctor in training, Kat. So from your experience as a clinical psychologist in training, do you think that mental health services are well enough equipped, and that there's enough understanding about the issues that could arise from leaving a religion?
The easy answer is no, and the more complicated answer is that's not a surprise. I think that the easy answer of being no is that, well, at the end of the day, this isn't, as I said earlier, this isn't a thing that has gained a wide enough status or a wide enough understanding that people know about it or understand the ins and outs of it from the get-go. Heck, when I was doing my research and I was talking to random people on the street about, did you know about this? And they're like, can people even leave their religious faith? I mean, and that's within the last 5 odd years or whatever. So again, I think that the notion of whether, professionals in these positions are going to know about this, it's not surprising if they don't. Now, what professionals would understand and should have the training to understand is the difficulties that are therefore associated with what they've been through. So the changes in ideology from one to another, the changes in family structures, the changes in attachment styles, the changes in or even the difficulties in how those things are broken down, the difficulties of homelessness, the difficulties of shunning, the difficulties of being abused as a result, the intricacies of how one identity formation is no longer legitimate, let's say. All of those things all those things a professional would have an understanding about. So yeah, that's the best way to explain it. More work is needed to gain that understanding, the same way that honor-based violence, forced marriage, female genital mutilation, recently people have become more aware of what they are. I think we can follow a similar model in basically increasing public awareness of what that is. Again, this one differs a little bit because it taps into things that hits people's nerves. And religion is one of those facets of life and society that people care quite strongly about. So it's a very difficult kind of thing to work through, but yeah, nonetheless.
Great, thank you.
That was the shortest answer I've ever given.
I'll take it. One from Mark for anyone who wants to answer, although he does specifically ask Hari where you get your waistcoats from. They're very smart. But prior to that, has asked, Professor Richard Dawkins writes about surveys on religious faith where many people say they are Christian, but they actually are not, which I think all of us are likely familiar with, from going to weddings in churches of people who aren't religious, etc. Is that a phenomenon any of you have come across in your own former faiths?
No, because nobody wants to specifically people I know or anyone in my family, nobody wants to say they are irreligious or they're not Muslim, because I mean, I had one one of my former best friends that I kind of lost to faith, when I told her about this, she was like, yeah, I had my doubts with faith, but I'd never not call myself a Muslim. So she was like, why don't you do that? But I'm like, I genuinely don't believe in God. So I can't call myself a Muslim because it would be just using the label for the sake of it. And for a lot of, again, people in Muslim communities, it's not safe to do so. I've had people that I went to school with like message me saying, you know, thank you for like being someone who exists, that I know this happens, but they can't talk about it because people can't risk losing their families. I personally probably wouldn't have said anything if I could get away with not saying it, because the pain and sort of emotional sort of hardships that we went through was not worth it at the time. But now I find it had been. So it's very difficult, especially when there's no representatives for your demographic out there to be like, okay, I will not take this label anymore.
Yeah.
I just, this book just arrived, Hidden Heretic. It's a book by an academic on the phenomenon of ultra-Orthodox Jews who are atheists, but who live double lives. And this is very common. I'm in touch with several groups of people who complete atheists, don't believe a thing, but they're married, kids. And as I said, this is more of it's a community where if you leave it, you will lose your wife, you will lose your kids. And so on. So yes, this is a phenomenon I'm very familiar with. Also, another similar point, as I've mentioned before, in Judaism you can, not in ultra-Orthodox Judaism. Ultra-Orthodox Judaism, belief in God is vitally important and essential, and you can't go without it. But in Judaism generally, you can be a Jew and an atheist. I know rabbis who are openly atheists, not ultra-Orthodox rabbis, but Jewish rabbis. And maybe just a brief moment on it, because I think it's important. Religion and culture can give people structure and meaning. Everyone has a culture. You know, people grow up in this country atheists and they still celebrate Christmas, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm really lucky that in Judaism I was able to, you know, even though I'm an atheist, I'm openly an atheist, not ashamed of it, I can still celebrate some cultural elements. Because look, I don't have Christmas. I didn't grow up with Christmas. It doesn't mean much to me. So, you know, I can still keep a Friday night dinner. I can still keep a Jewish festival. And I often listen to ex-Muslim friends, and I often wish this was more acceptable in Islam, that you can say, I'm a cultural Muslim, I don't believe, but you know, I still enjoy the Eid, you know?
Yes, same.
I mean, look, I think let's just look at the way that those things are carried out, right? So when we look at census data, we look at the things when people are assigning, you know, what religious faith are you, who's completing that? Usually it's the people within the family that are then completing that. So the likelihood, and then the power dynamic of somebody who's a child or something to state, well, I don't, that's quite a difficult thing for that to even occur. So that's the first thing. Secondly, what that also suggests is that then lowers the likelihood of what the stats are actually saying as to how many non-religious people are actually out there within perhaps BAME communities, if that power struggle is there. Thirdly, if we look at the way that honor continues itself, if we look at the way that coercion continues itself, if we look at all of those factors as well, even if you're coming out as non-religious, or even if you're being quite affrontive about it and stating that that's your thing, what's the likelihood of that even being taken into regard in a document like that? Again, can be quite low. So I think, again, it's looking at the power imbalances and the power factors that are in play as to how that works. On top of all of that, you've got a beautiful thing called cognitive dissonance, where you may be completely culturally religious at home, and you might completely not be outside of it. Completely fine, whatever you do to keep yourself safe. At the end of the day, there's no easy answer to this one.
Thank you. So I'm sorry if we didn't have time to get to your question. We've had a lot in, and they're very good questions. We will open this up for a more general chat shortly. So then you can certainly ask questions to our panelists, who are hopefully going to stick around for 10, 15 minutes. One last one, I think, which would be a nice way to close this section of the discussion off, was a question from Lucy to all of the panel. So how has your experience influenced your views of your former religion more broadly? And has your opinion changed much since you first left?
Sorry, go for it.
Okay, wait. Okay, so like on an individual, when I first left, it made me sort of a lot more angrier towards it because I was trying to find good in it, but I was being exposed to all of the bad. Now, I don't have any sort of animosity towards it. Like, I think as an apostate, you go through the phase of being incredibly angry, but then you sort of have to move on. Otherwise, your own mental well-being is just going to suffer, which is why I had to leave like certain parts of the ex-Muslim subreddit. That's when that I sort of moved on from, because it was quite a sort of an angry place, because that's where you go when you first come out. That's sort of the first feelings. Now, like with all religions, I believe, like, you know, it's fine on your individual level as long as you attribute your religion to yourself. It doesn't influence the lives of anybody else. And I'm very, very against the use of sort of religion and state, which is the one thing I sort of talk about a lot more in terms of Islamic theocracies. They do not need to exist. And I feel like in terms of Islam as a religion right now, because it's a lot younger religion. It's now going through sort of its enlightenment phase. There's a lot more criticism. We've had countries like Sudan, which are sort of making this break from religion and state with them repealing their apostasy laws this year. And now we have an International Apostasy Day. So it's just moving forward. And I don't really have any sort of negative feelings towards the religion anymore. It's just more how the way it's been used and how individuals are suffering that makes me sort of angry, how people are interpreting it. Because there's a lot of people that there are lots of good bits about the religion. There is a lot of good things that come with it. But it's also, we have to acknowledge the bad and how that's affecting a lot more people nowadays.
Yeah, I completely understand that.
I would argue quite specifically that people will hold ideologies, right? So whether it's a religious one, whether it's a political one, people are going to hold on to ideologies going forwards. So in my eyes, or in the way that I see it, is that it's not about what you hold on to, it's the effect of it, it's the outcome of it, and it's how you then utilize it. Because the slippery slope with apostasy, the slippery slope with this is going, you know, religion is just bad and completely awful, etc. When actually we need to then open it out a little bit and go, well, actually there are loads of people that are religious that are really great people, and etc. etc. So I think as many people who are on this journey, you kind of go through your 7 stages of grief, and you get to the other end where you accept, and you're more of an acceptance stage of where you're at and where things are at now. I think the interesting part is how are people then utilizing that? So there's an argument at the moment where how can religion, or how can religious faith really kind of find itself better within 21st century society? And I think that it's reformation, it's basically adapting, and it's not abusing people for things that would have got them killed several centuries earlier. And I think holding on to those things in this day and age, like the recent murder of the teacher in France, are all examples of how those kind of the ideologies in that respect, and the extremism of that ideology then needs to be challenged. It's therefore not lumping it all into one thing and going, right, all Muslims need to apologize for that one act. It's about going, well, actually, how is the ideology itself looking to progress, evolve, and develop? Even Christianity, even Judaism, even Hinduism. You have to look at the Hindu in India to go, well, actually, look how far they are at the moment, look how politicized and quite ugly it is. And you have to look at the massacres of Muslims in India to realize that in the past, or even Modi being part of the killing of a load of Muslims in a train in Ahmedabad, or in Gujarat, sorry. So again, it's about what you do, and it's about how it then develops. Everybody holds an ideology. It's about what the outcome of that is, and how it affects somebody else.
Thanks, Hari. I think that's a great way to bring this section to a close.
Can I answer that question as well?
Yes, you can. Yes, jump in, Izzy. Go on.
Yeah, all right. For me, this question torments me. The question was how I relate to my former community. It genuinely torments me. I think the day I'll have an answer to that question is the day I will find healing for the trauma I've gone through. I grapple with this every day. I write about it. I write poetry about it because I don't have another way to express it. When I speak with my parents, now sadly we're not in touch, but at some point we were, and I see that the pain, the love, making sense of imagine you have a son who has gone and joined ISIS and is beheading people, right? And it's your son, and you've given birth to him, but he's done something so wrong. This is how my parents feel about me. And just making sense, knowing that your parents think that you've joined ISIS is really, really, it's difficult, but it's yeah. So look, it's a community. Most people are happy. Most people have beautiful families, but it's also in massive contradiction to the rest of society. I just look at it with pity, not pity on people. That's patronizing. I don't pity people. I look at I don't know, self-pity that I had to exist on that intersection. That's how my parents have to think about me. So how do I think of the community? I think none of us can judge other communities. None of us knows the right way to live. None of us knows what's best for us, what makes us happier. I can't say if maybe people in that community are happier than us, the secular society. We have plenty of problems of our own. But the intersection where these radically different worldviews meet, that's where problems arise. People who want to move between communities, people who want to leave, that's where the tragedy happens.
Fantastic.
Izzy's completely not wrong there in relation to the level of threat that's seen as a result of what your child has done or what your child is doing. If they know so much about what might happen, why would they do that? And I think it's that level of threat that they're going, why would my child go through that or go that far? I think therefore psychologically the argument then is that how do we then normalize this process from where it is at the moment, which is very threat based, in relation to fight, flight, or freeze, as to how people are reacting as a result of that happening within their family, and actually getting it to a point where actually that opportunity to change or put glasses on or sunglasses on or change your perspective on things is actually more accepted today than it was before. I think the greatest thing about what happens within religious space or communities isn't the fact that they, we get rid of them or they stop being in existence or whatever. It's the acceptance they bring along the way. So if that occurs more than it is now, then that's a positive.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I agree to add on that. Sort of in terms of like, it's just the whole sort of like the community aspect. So my parents accepted me. That was a massive thing for them to do as parents in terms of the rest of my dad's siblings seeing this, my mom's, like my grandparents actually saying, okay, so my parents have chosen to keep me within the family, and I'm not leaving. I'm still going to turn up to the Eids and stuff like the family events. I'm still going to be there because, I still have like relationships with my younger cousins and stuff like that, because again, some of them are too young enough to know some. Again, it's kind of like, it was an unsaid thing. Everybody knows, but they're not going to address it. But it's like when you go into a room, I'm like, okay, I've just got to accept that everybody else is going to look at you a bit different, going to question a bit different. But the fact that my presence is still there is showing that, you can't completely get rid of. And I think, again, like you're saying, this acceptance, the only way we're going to normalize this is if you're lucky. I was lucky I have my parents to accept me, but then me still turning up to these things, it's still anxious going to sort of big family events and stuff like that. But as long as I'm still there, it shows to other people of my age or younger members of the family that you can still be part of this. It's being vocal in community. That's the only thing that's going to change it.
I think that's the thing, Saff, in that there are people like, I'm really lucky that I've been accepted, and actually I can go to any family event and not worry. I don't have any of those worries. So actually what it then shows to anybody who's coming up or is part of that or not is that actually, there are communities that are starting to accept people in that way, and actually it's starting. It's only just started. So yeah, we're at the start of it. Great. And Julian, I won't say more.
I think that's a positive note to end things on. Thank you so much to everyone for attending and for all of your questions. We're going to stop recording shortly, but then we will keep the chat. We'll keep Zoom open for about 10 minutes. So please feel free to turn your videos on then and have a chat with our panelists. I'd like to thank all of the panelists, Hari Parekh, Izzy Posen, and Saff Khalique, for giving us eye-opening and incredibly well articulated points on their background. Our next event is next Wednesday, and it's on campaigning and on the blasphemy laws that still exist in Europe, specifically Northern Ireland. And Julian has just posted a link to that in the chat. So it would be really nice if you could all join us there for another evening, which I imagine will be just as interesting as this one. If you're based in the UK and you're not a member or supporter of Young Humanists, please join us. You can find us on Facebook and you can sign up officially on the Humanists UK website. Just give us a Google, and we run lots of topical events like this throughout the year. Thanks again, and yeah, if you want to stick around for a chat, you can, but otherwise, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at future events.